It is Monday, April 13th, 2026. Yes, time again for yet another podcast episode of This Week in College Viability News and Commentary. Hi, everybody. Gary Stalker with College Viability in front of the Blue Yeti microphone and the always working Riverside.fm podcast software. Where are we headed this last week? We are broadcasting from St. Louis. We are going to half off Hopkins. Johns Hopkins University, facing market pressures, offers an interesting discount to Maryland graduate students. Maine, the state of Maine, is putting screws to private colleges with a free and permanent college scholarship program. I've got some news and thoughts on that. And small colleges, small private colleges, are dying in a winner-take-all university marketplace. In football, I would get a penalty for piling on this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. And tuition discount rates continue to increase to the benefit of students, to be sure, but not so much to colleges in need of more revenue. And just some insider information for those of you who regularly listen to the podcast. The new 2026 college majors completion app is ready. 165 majors, 2,000 plus colleges, associates, masters, and bachelors, 2020 through 2024. Here's an insider's tip. Just yesterday, yes, on Sunday, my product development manager showed me every single complete major for every SIC code, every job code in iPads. Stunning access to data. And we will soon have every college's public, private, 2-year, 4-year majors completions for everything from 2020 through 2024. Nobody has that. And if you want to take an early look, drop me a note. Drop me a note to Gary at College Viability. And maybe you can find us some feedback. I'll give you access to the early versions of the tool, and we'll take it from there. And so let's go to, where do we always start? Layoffs and cutbacks. Earlham College ends some majors to cut costs. Chris Hardy had the story on April 7th in Western Way News. Some of the courses going bye-bye are mathematics, philosophy, and French. Among the subjects at Earlham College says it will no longer provide curriculum, which I guess means courses, or degree programs in which students can major. The president, Paul Sigowski, said on March 30th that Earlham has concluded a curriculum planning process tied to its recent decision to cut staffing programs, and on it goes. Interestingly, the Chronicle staff, the Higher Education Chronicle staff, has put together, for the first time I've seen, some updates on, they call them Finance Live Updates. Now, to the good folks at the Chronicle, if you're using my stuff, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want to quickly, and I'm not sure I'm going to do this every time they post one, because most of the time I have these stories anyway before the Chronicle. But here's what they posted. And all it does is tie into what I've said for months and months and months and months. This is an industry in decline, and these stories confirm that. Iowa State recommended last week that 10 programs be shuttered and 13 others consolidated. University of Maine faculty members are upset. They said to the Bangor Daily News, they're not able to fully execute their jobs. They lack support and are deeply concerned about the leadership leading us into an unsustainable and poorly planned future. While this note doesn't say anything about a no confidence vote, you have to wonder if that's not forthcoming. And again, while I talk about no confidence, Chuck Ambrose and Mike Neitzel's new book on no confidence votes in higher education comes out, I believe, tomorrow on the 14th or 15th of the month. It's available through your favorite online bookstore accesses, including Amazon.com. Evergreen State College faced a scramble last week. There was this false rumor, I guess false, that says they were about to close. The college's president took the unusual step of having to tell a local newspaper that the Tacoma campus, I guess there's more than one campus, is a critical part of the institution and it wasn't going anywhere. I don't know what that means, but the president felt compelled to say that, and I don't see the president's name in the Chronicles clip. In New Hampshire, Keene State College faces a $3.3 million budget deficit. That's from the Keene Sentinel, and they're proposing changes to reorganizing into 3 schools. I won't give you the 3 schools' names. It's common. They say the president at the college, Dr. Burks, can't remember, I don't see the first name. Dr. Burks says a marketing campaign would emphasize the university's advantages in the liberal arts. It has the liberal arts, she continues, it has the liberal arts skills and capabilities, talking about Keene State College, that the best liberal arts schools have, but also it has the best applied programs. True college speak. The best applied programs that most liberal arts schools don't have. I would like to see the documentation on that. Come on, guys. Come on. How many times have I indicated on this podcast show and other places that you cannot and will not be able to grow your way out of a declining market? That's the folks at Blockbuster back in the day. Enrollment at the college at Keene State dropped from 5,000 to a little under 3,000 since 2015. And the faculty has been cut by half over the past decade. To Bowling Green State University we go, suspending 6 degree programs, reconfigure 20 more. Andrew Bailey had that story at WTOL 11 on April 10th. They have a long list of programs going to be impacted. I'll copy and paste those in the show notes so you can see those. I'm not even going to read my shortened list. It's common stuff: economics, communications, public health, stats. They do want to ask the state for relief in 3 majors: American culture studies, ethnic studies, popular culture, and women's gender and sexuality studies. Good luck with that. And folks, again, I will share again that it is happening. And I think I've talked about this almost every week for the past many months. The market is adjusting to meet demand. I see it's still in my notes here. The Bachelor of Arts in Popular Culture is not a big winner at Bowling Green State University based on the state of Ohio's minimum specs. Now, most of this is happening, as I've said before, on the public side, but I see it happening more quietly on the private college side. Higher education is recognizing that every college cannot be everything to everybody. And with cuts in programs and majors at both public and private colleges, there will come less interest in enrolling because you've got less to choose from, along with increased pressure on tuition prices and their associated impact on budgets as well. And again, remember our college majors completion app, the version for academic leaders, $199. 2,500 plus colleges, 5 years worth of data, associates, bachelor's, majors, 665 common majors. And I sold a lot of those just last week. Page 2, half off at Hopkins. Johns Hopkins University, the Carey Business School there, offers steep discounts to Maryland graduates. So the headline reads, this was at thebanner.com. Ellie Wolf had the story on April 6th of this year. Students graduating from a Maryland college this spring now qualify for a 50% discount on graduate tuition at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. The college said in a press release it's meant to help those students, and as they enter a tough hiring season, all right, don't get hired, give us money to go back and learn more business stuff. The college's master's degree programs typically cost somewhere between $50,000 and $71,000 and are equivalent to what others in the Baltimore area charge for graduate programs. You got to wonder, are other colleges going to adapt to this? Could this also be the high-end colleges like Johns Hopkins adjusting to the market? Sure it is. And we see a big-time discount, 50%. That's in the same ballpark as the common tuition discount for much less prestigious colleges than Johns Hopkins. And do you think other colleges will respond? Well, you bet your diploma that they will. The Maine governor, M-A-I-N-E, the state of Maine, Governor Mills signs supplemental budget, making free college scholarships permanent. Again, as in always the case with the show, I'll have the link to the story in the show notes. This was an internal document from Maine Community Colleges on April 10th. The story reads, Governor Janet Mills made the Maine free college scholarship permanent for high school graduates in the class of 2026 and beyond. Maine Community College President David Dagler said this is a once-in-a-generation moment for Maine's higher education landscape. Okay, I'll give him that. This gives future high school graduates the means and opportunity to pursue a path they may have felt was financially out of reach. I'll give him that. And now that it's a permanent program, a generation of young people, says Mr. Dagler, Dr. Dagler maybe, a generation of young people can move with confidence and intention toward a brighter future for themselves and Maine. Okay, got to have a little PR in there. Nothing wrong with that. We just like to point them out because we have fun pointing out spin. All right, so the state of Maine gets students enrolled, gets them enrolled. You know what I'm going to follow up with next? Let's see if they can graduate anywhere close to 50% of those students in either 2 years at community colleges or 4 years at bachelor degree colleges. By the way, full-time tuition, list price, full-time tuition at Maine's community colleges is $2,880 per year. And the story doesn't say how the state is funding the Maine Free College Scholarship Program. In any case, not good news for privates in Maine in particular, and probably the Northeast in general. This is going to provide yet more financial challenges for private colleges in that area who already are in a geographical location where there are way too many colleges and way too few students willing to attend those colleges. Page 3, Matt Hisrick had an interesting LinkedIn post, and it talks about the net price of college, and others have talked about this. I've done some social media posts. Can't remember if I've done it on the podcast. According to the College Board, inflation-adjusted net tuition at private nonprofit colleges fell from $19,800 and change in 2007 to an estimated not quite $17,000 in 2025 and 26. The story from Matt goes on to write, this steady pricing was made possible, at least in part, by high margin international, mostly graduate students. Now institutions will face growing pressure to raise prices because those international students aren't coming back anytime soon, if they come back at all. And the pandemic relief programs that helped fund many colleges for a few years have long since ended. And now colleges are going to be faced with rising costs, including pressure from faculty and staff to keep up with higher costs of living. And this long plateau of, maybe the list price was increasing, but the net price with discounts was decreasing, is going to end. Colleges are going to have to look at ways to raise more new net revenue from somewhere, and most of them are predominantly stuck with just tuition and fees. And of course, it's going to be very difficult to raise tuition prices in a declining market where there are too many colleges and not enough students. And remember what I've said before, what is good for the student usually means financial challenges for the colleges. Page 4, Doug Belkin had this story in the Wall Street Journal on April 9th. The small private colleges dying in a winner-take-all university marketplace. Kind of an odd headline. So I had quite a few folks send me the links to this story. First of all, thanks to all of you who send me links about stories that either I haven't seen yet or you're scooping me. And I know I've teased many of you of being scoops because you send me stuff that I haven't got yet. I'm grateful. Keep sending those news stories my way. And most of the time, not always, I'll let you know if I'm going to use them in the podcast or in my social media, or if I'm going to pass on using them for whatever reason. But again, I'm grateful. Keep sending me those stories. Well, first of all, the small private colleges dying in a winner-take-all university marketplace is not new news. It's not new. It's been out there for a long time. But it again reinforces the reality that higher education is moving toward that public awareness tipping point that I have talked about so many times. They're going to recognize that there is general financial trauma throughout higher education. The story specifically, the college specifically referenced in this story from Doug Belkin was St. Michael's in Colchester, Vermont. And it talks about for the most recent completed year, 24-25, St. Michael's accepted 85% of its applicants. That's a really high number, right at my threshold for calling it a heartbeat admissions policy. Only 12% of those accepted enrolled, and only a handful paid full price. This is according to federal data, I'm presuming the National Center for Education Statistics and its IPEDS database. The most competitive U.S. colleges, Belkin notes, typically admit single-digit, acceptance rates are in single digits, and they enroll 80%, something like that, of their admitted students. St. Michael's, again from this story, dug into its endowment, which is roughly $90 million, but they're drawing way too much from their endowment with annual draws to be sustainable. And it's again, not new news, but it just reinforces what we've talked about. So for at least the last 2 to 3 years, I have regularly observed that I was seeing an anecdotal trend of students moving toward the big name brand colleges, the Ivies, the Power Fours, those kind of places. I saw that, got my gut feeling, got my anecdotal observations in the summer enrollment announcements. And you may remember me saying I have many Google alerts, and one is for college enrollments. And from, July through October, I get lots of Google alerts about colleges making enrollment announcements. Almost all of them are positive. Our enrollment has gone up. Some are legitimately so. Some are spinning it so much that you need a medicine to keep your head from spinning. But the colleges that do the spinning to make themselves look good, there's one other group, and that's the no news is bad news colleges. No news is bad news. These are the ones with decreasing enrollment, and they were not about to share that with the world, with rare exception. On occasion, a college will make that announcement. And I can speculate on why. There is that undercurrent of concern about smaller colleges, particularly those in non-urban areas. And we all like brand names in almost everything that we buy. Why would it be any different for colleges? While the experiences are certainly different at each and every college, the product, the service they get is the same. It's a piece of paper. We call it, of course, a diploma that says I showed up, I did the work, and I completed something like 120 hours of college level credit. Here is the concern I have. There's a trend towards the big boys. I think it's obvious. But at some point, these brand name big boy and girl colleges will run out of on-campus space. And some are already facing that issue. I see the occasional news story to that effect. When that happens, when they run out of space, where do those students who want the big brand name go? We can always get more toothpaste. We can always get more paint at the paint store. We can always get more ink pens. But when a college runs out of space, what happens next? Do these students go to regional publics? Maybe. Big privates? Maybe. Online-only colleges? Certainly a possibility to think about that. And I want to do the wrap for my final podcast here in St. Louis on a LinkedIn post that Dan Silverberg, who is the CEO of Propel K-20, had on LinkedIn this week. And he notes the average tuition discount rate at private colleges just hit 56.3%. Now, let me define my terms. Tuition discount are unfunded discounts that colleges use to forego revenue just to get students in the door. So a $40,000 list price, 50% discount, the student's only going to be charged $20,000 for tuition. There's another cost associated with room and board. It has climbed every single year since, I think, 2015. Mr. Silverberg goes on to write at their Propel K-20 research found that closed institutions, those that have closed, average 78% tuition dependency, reliance on tuition and fees to cover expenses. When he goes on to write, when your entire revenue model depends on tuition and you are discounting more than half of it, which is what the case is here, you're not running a pricing strategy, Mr. Silverberg says. You are running a slow liquidation. Let me say that again. When your discounts are so high, that's not a pricing strategy. That's a liquidation strategy. You're slowly going to liquidate the courses, the majors, the employees, faculty, physical assets, And at the end of the day, you're going to look back and say, hey, that exceedingly high tuition discount was indeed us doing a liquidation of our college. We just didn't see it at the time. And indeed, I see this leadership by public relations all the time from colleges, where they take data, any data they can, to fool students and families into believing they are a successful and viable organization, successful and viable college. But as we see week after week, the markets are adjusting, and the data that Matt Hendricks and others and I are presenting prove that this era of consolidation, closures now, mergers and acquisitions later, is just getting started. Just getting started. And when we do this podcast 2, 3, 4, or 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this era and say, we were living in the middle of a higher ed consolidation period. We just didn't see it as it was happening. So that indeed wraps up the last podcast episode from the College Viability World headquarters here in St. Louis. I will not record a podcast on April 20th. I won't have access to hardware or anything. My next show 2 weeks from today will originate from the new world headquarters in another extra bedroom, this time in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where my wife and I are going to be spending the next 10 or 15 or 20 years on this earth. And I guess I have to wrap. What a country. What a country where you can start and operate a successful business from an available room in your home. I know I am grateful for that. I am grateful for the listeners. I'm grateful for those who share with me their leads and stories. And thanks as always for listening. Make sure to share the podcast link, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm Gary Stocker at College Viability.